As military spouses, we very much take on the role of caregiver in so many ways. And unfortunately, in extreme circumstances, that role takes on a whole new meaning for many of us. In any case, today I'm speaking to Sierra Morgan, who is an expert in caregiving. As a matter of fact, she's a caregiver's coach. And she's going to talk to us about how to navigate that journey in a way that doesn't leave you feeling completely overwhelmed and exhausted. So, without further ado, Sierra, thank you so much for being with me today. I appreciate you.
Yes, I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. So, will you tell us just a couple, I don't care what it is, anything that feels important to you, just a couple things.
Yeah, for sure. So again, thank you so much for having me. My name is Sierra, also known as Cece. I always say the hostess with the mostest of the bottom line is, but I am also an HR consultant, and my business, Rose HR, does also focus now on caregiver coaching, and that is where my heart is outside of HR. So for me, I've been a caregiver for 15 years, which is a very long time. But I have done it for my great grandmother and my grandmother. And unfortunately, with caregiving, it just happens just like that, right overnight. My grandmother fell, and the next thing I knew, I was making her medical decisions, putting the hospital bed in the living room. Life and the different dynamics of life changed just in an instant. And so my job is to try to make sure that people can avoid the same mistakes that I made, because at the time I knew no other caregivers to lean on or vent to or just anything. So I had to figure it all out on my own.
Like just thrown right in the deep end.
Yes.
Yes. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. It's so interesting because I find time and time again what we do in life, like whatever we're led to do, our calling, it's because so many times from our own life experiences, the things that were hard for us are what brought us to where we are. And then we kind of have a passion to share that with others. I figured it out and I want to help you figure it out.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. Okay. So we all know is so we're my community is mostly military spouses, military spouse entrepreneurs, but we all know that I don't want to get too deep and too heavy, but the
No, I got
topic kind of inherently is. But we all know that with what our spouses do, things could change in an instance, whether it's physical, whether it's mental, emotional. These things are very likely to come up, if not for us, for friends. So even if
mhm.
my viewers don't experience it, we all know somebody who is a caregiver for their service member kind of situation. So I feel like this is such a perfect topic to have for my community. And because while I talk to military spouse entrepreneurs, so many of us are building these businesses and trying to deal with life and then throw in having to care for an entire other individual, an adult individual who used to lessen our load, but now, you know,
Adds to it in a sense.
been
Yeah.
added to, yes, in a way. Um, my hope is that this community doesn't have to give up the things they're passionate about to care
Mhm.
for their loved ones. So
Yeah,
we
and that's something
provide that.
I
Yes.
yeah, not to cut you off, but that's something that I try to explore with my caregiver coaching, as well, just advocating for workplace policy. Some people, because your head is spinning when you're thrown into that world, you don't know what you should do first. And so, from an HR perspective, people don't realize you have FMLA, you have, other different types of leave that can help to support you if you need to take time off of work. But for me, it's just very important to teach others how to balance their career as well as their home life as a caregiver, because it is a hard balance. It's essentially a full-time job, because when you're caregiving, you never know what kind of person you're going to wake up to in the morning. And with the baby boomer generation, coming into, a military spouse essentially could find themselves caring for their spouse and or their parents. So, balancing and juggling both, I mean, realistically. So yeah, I'm all about it. But a lot of the skills and things that we're going to be talking about today, although yes, we're talking about caregiving, can be transferable to really any situation, whether you're a single parent or whatever the case is as well, because we all have situations and we can all get burnt out and stressed over it. And it's just a matter of how we deal with it and building up that community around us.
So I think it's going to be key for us to dive into like kind of that balance situation.
Yes.
So why don't we start at the beginning,
Mhm.
like the planning phase? How do you prepare kind of situation? Does that feel like a good place to start?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. A lot of people, like I said, it's probably one of the, in my opinion, underrated topics because, again, people don't think about it until something happens. And I always say that it's good to pre plan. And what I mean by that is talking to your spouse or loved ones about what your wishes are, should something happen. It's don't think of it as, oh, I'm putting it negative into the universe. No, we're just having that discussion while we're able to do that and in our right frame of minds. Because, like I said, anything can happen. It's temporary. We're down. We want to make sure that our spouse, our loved ones know what we want to do, whether that's an advanced directive. An advanced directive basically is where you talk about resuscitation, who you want in charge of your medical decisions, should you be temporarily or permanently incapacitated. And when you fill out that form, you can get it from your local hospital. You can look it up online, Google it. Google is our best friend these days. You can do that. And then what you would do is keep a copy, give a copy to the person that you designate, keep a copy for yourself, and then also give a copy to the hospital, your local hospital. Also talking about a will. Again, another topic when you hear those buzzwords, people immediately go to the extreme of the negative. And it's like, no, you're just pre-planning how you want things to go should something happen. And so again, that's your opportunity to put in your wishes, how you want things to go, inheritances, how you want things to be left, especially if you have kids. That's very important too. If you have kids, you want to make sure that their futures are intact, whoever you're going to be leaving them with. And I know that's a tough conversation too for spouses to kind of figure out if they don't have godparents for their kids, who would be responsible, because by default, people think, oh, well, they'll just go to my parents. Well, heaven forbid something happened to all of you at the same time. That's what I tell people too, being mindful of that, as well as either long-term insurance, which is a new thing. Some states are actually requiring it where it's a long-term care tax that comes out of your paycheck. But again, that's something that goes towards, like if you have to go into some type of facility, it'll help pay for that. A lot of people don't realize the cost of healthcare. I mean, it's while we're healthy, healthcare is expensive. Okay.
Yeah.
So when we get to that point, and I get it from a military standpoint, you have the veteran access, but you still need to be prepared because sometimes there are certain things that you may need that may take a while for you to get, etc. If people do find themselves in a caregiving space, there is a benefit for veterans called VA aid in attendance. And essentially, you can apply for that as the spouse or the veteran yourself. And the VA would basically give you money to take care of either yourself or your loved one for you to use either for home health aid, for medical supplies, anything medically related. And they deposit it right into your account.
Oh,
wow. A lot of people don't realize that, but
I didn't know that. And my husband and I are both veterans. I had no idea.
Yep. It does take a while to get, just like disability, it takes a while. You have to keep going. But when I did it for my great grandmother, because my great grandfather was in the Navy Reserves, I just had to submit their marriage license and a DD 214 as well. So did that. And then it probably took, I would say maybe a few months, but you did get that back pay starting from when you first applied to when you got approved. So that was a good thing because
I love the back pay, yes.
Yeah, because paying for all of that is, again, expensive. So I can't even imagine how it's going to be, let's say 10, 20 years, from now, how expensive healthcare. So those are some things, not to sound overwhelming, but that people should probably think about. Make sure you have your important papers in a safe place for people to get access to, should they need to.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice because, of course, it feels morbid, right? To think about what am I going to do if I die? Of course, that kind of sounds morbid. But if you can shift your, I'm a life coach. Anybody who's listened to me for a while, it's a shift of mindset. It's a thing that we check the box for. So my husband and I actually both did go get our wills taken care of a couple of years, not even that long ago. I think we actually waited longer than I would have liked to. We just kept putting it off. And at some point I thought, you know what, our kids are 11 and 9. We're going to need, God forbid, anything happens to both of us. I want to be certain that they're going to end up where we want them to be, set up the way that we want to have them set up. The people who care for them are set up, all of the things, right? And so we finally, kicked our rear in gear and when we did the thing. And what I wanted to share about that is for us in the military community, we have JAG available to us. And so that's a free service actually that is available to use.
Okay. Is that a service that provides
JAG? It's our legal office. Yeah.
Oh. Okay. You taught me something.
Yeah. I mean, we're both learning today. I feel like I'm learning a whole lot more from you, but there it is. It's my little gem to contribute.
Awesome. And I'll also add to, with life insurance, our beneficiaries, as well, keeping those things updated. I had to educate people all the time from an HR standpoint. A lot of people will just put a primary beneficiary and they'll put down your spouse, because if you're married, you have to put your spouse down as a primary for at least 50% of that, and then you can add your kids. You can have your spouse and your kids all as your primary, as long as the percentages equal 100%. But I always recommend and have to convince people to put a secondary, because I always say, heaven forbid, you all go at the same time, your money's going to go to the government, and then your family has to fight in courts to be able to get that information and take care of your last wishes. So
I don't
again,
think
not trying to sound more,
solitary one of us wants
but
that.
right. But those are things, and I've seen it from an HR standpoint where the families have had to do that, and they come to me, and I'm like, it's handled by a third party. Unfortunately, it's nothing that I can do about it. So
Yeah. Yeah, don't let your money go to the government unnecessarily. Let's not do
right.
that. If that's not enough to propel
Make it enough.
everybody right now, I don't even know what to tell you.
For sure. So, but yeah.
Okay. All right. So if you're listening, you're not already, take notes, the documents that you need to start working out. It's not a gloom and doom. It's a let's check this thing off and have it done to make sure everybody that we love is cared for and all of things are attended to. And then you can kind of set it and forget it for a little while, unless there's any other major life changes, marriages, children, all those things. Set it and forget it.
For sure. Yeah,
okay.
Update it if there's any changes. I've seen people do that too. They still have like their ex on there, and I'm like,
I don't know if that's better or worse than letting it go to the government. I guess it depends on your
I know, right? Yeah, okay. That's a gamble for your own self.
Right. Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. So now we're prepared. So let's just say we end up in that caregiver position. And I guess we kind of gotta, you tell me, we may have to speak a little generally here. I don't know.
Right.
There's probably a range of things that you've got to do based on how dependent your
loved one is
on you. Yeah. But what does that look like in the way of, I guess let's start with how do you make sure that you don't get forgotten in the chaos of taking care of others?
No, that's a great question. But before I answer that, I will just say too that when a loved one expectedly, has to have care, there's an emotional toll that it takes on the both of you, especially on that incapacitated person, whether it's temporarily or permanently. So just make sure you handle with care, if you will, because, for instance, my great grandmother, even though she fell, she was still kind of walking like a baby would, like on a walker, from therapy. But she let doubt set in and she got depressed. And she just basically became confined to the bed and the wheelchair. And I found myself having to lift her to transfer her. So it's very important to try to continue to lift yourself up, but also lift that person that's going through it, because that's the best medicine, is bringing positivity into that person's life, because that's half the battle. If you have the right mindset, then you can get through anything, so I just wanted to mention that first. But as far as like taking care of yourself and making sure you don't get, lost in the sauce, as I say, it's very important to create a support group resource and have resources. A lot of times people find themselves as a caregiver and they don't have, a support team, meaning like other family members or friends or anything like that. And they try to do it all on their own. Please, please, please understand, you cannot do it all on your own. Many have tried. And it's a daunting task, because it's not just the physical part of taking care of a person. You have medication reminders, making doctor's appointments, handling their financial matters, etc. And that can be a lot. That's legit a full-time job. So if you really want to work 2 full-time jobs, go right ahead. But I wouldn't recommend it. But you have to make sure that you put yourself first. And I know that sounds crazy to say.
Not in my community. Absolutely not.
But still have that, even if it's just one day at a time, or once that loved one is gone to bed, take that woosah, just like you would if you're a parent. When the kids go to bed, you're kind of like, oh, that's my time to get things done, get things prepared. Or if you get up in the morning, let's say before the kids, having that coffee or anything, it's the same type of mindset. So doing something that you like to do that is fun, and if you have, let's say, a hobby, making sure you're not letting go of that hobby, because that loved one would not want you to lose yourself in this process. They want you to make sure that you take care of yourself as well. They might can't communicate that now, but knowing that the person that they were, understand that they do want that. So don't feel guilty. A lot of caregivers, just like parents, have that self-guilt, and it causes them to get burnt out even faster. And you can't help anybody if you don't take care of yourself, because you would be right there next to them in the hospital bed if you don't take care of yourself. So you have to lift yourself up, find other people that, share the same type of activities that you do, just like as a military spouse. I'm sure if there's a community, obviously that's the point of this podcast, right? You communicate with other military spouses and you share stories and things like that, share tips. And that's essentially what we do and try to do in the caregiver community as well, because I might not be experiencing a situation that you're experiencing now, but who knows what may come down the line. So I want to learn and be able to help you and, go from there. Don't be afraid to assert yourself and go after what you want and need. And sometimes it can be a battle, like with the doctors or trying to get care from the government. Don't take no for an answer. If you know that's what you're supposed to have, keep fighting until you get it. You'll feel better in the end, for sure.
So many gems in there. I want to go back to what you were saying. But no, it's so good. So many good things. It just reminded me when you were talking about when you had to take over care at the beginning. And I didn't personally have to care for my aunt. That was my dad's sister, but she had a stroke. Gosh, I don't know if she was in her 40s or I'm not even sure, 40s or 50s. It was a ways back. And the sad thing is, she went entirely paralyzed on her left side.
Mm-hmm.
And with proper PT and occupational therapy and all of the things, there was a possibility she could have regained, and she never did.
Yeah.
She gave up hope. Just ended up in a wheelchair, bed,
Yeah.
all of the things for the
Which
rest of the
caused
time.
them to emotionally go down even further. And
It
I would
did.
imagine, if something happened, heaven forbid, to my spouse in the military, I can't even imagine or begin to imagine the emotional toll that would have on that person. So that's why it's like, yes, you have to build both yourself up, build your spouse up, take care of kids. You got to wear a lot of different hats, but you still have to try to carve out that time, for yourself, because you can't be everything to everyone without taking care of yourself first.
100%. And I think that the impact of taking care of yourself definitely rolls into all the other spaces, right? If you're taking care of yourself and your spouse sees that, it's incentive, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
inspiration. If you're encouraging your significant other, your spouse to stay uplifted and, I know it's difficult, but we've got this. I'm with you. I'm by your side. And you're encouraging one another, that rolls out into all areas of your life. It's just this
Right.
big, beautiful cycle of positive things, good things, when you're able
Mm-hmm.
to share that energy and that encouragement with one another. Alternatively, not doing it, because again, this is what I saw with my aunt. Her not being able to be independent any longer, have the things that she wanted, have her quality of life essentially tank, impacted all of her relationships,
Yeah.
including mine with hers, which broke my heart because she was always like the aunt that I just was so excited to spend time with and loved. And she was out of town. So when she visited, it was everything. And at
Oh.
some point, it shifted
Yeah.
because her mindset was just,
There and
that
and emotionally that took a toll on you too as well, because it's like now
everybody.
you're having to grieve the person that you once had,
Yeah.
essentially. So there is a grieving process with caregiving. A lot of times when people think of grief, they think of it as just losing a loved one, but no, if there's some type of change,
Yeah.
you're still having to grieve that. Just like, as I would say, as a military spouse, and you correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes you have to move around. So, and you've already built a life in one space. Now you're having to pick up and go to another. So you're grieving all of the different things that you once had. And
Yes.
it's a process. And I would be lying if I said you can click that switch off and on. I wish we could, but emotions don't run that way.
Mm-mm.
So
No, and it's not a thing I encourage. Like I also hate the sucky emotions. Like I hate to feel angry, I hate to feel sad, I hate to
I
feel
know.
frustrated. And also I've tried to avoid those personally and it doesn't work. You cannot avoid those and still have the quote unquote positive ones. So you
Right.
have to process them.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this isn't my show, like literally it is, but it's not about me going on a tangent. But one of the things I
Yeah.
do talk about is you have to process those
Yes.
emotions that we would really rather just not feel at all, or they end up living in your body and wreaking havoc. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
But you're
It
100%
affects
correct.
you. Yeah.
And that can happen. I'm a witness, like to the point where my doctors are like, "You don't have anybody else to help you?" And I'm like, "No, would you like to help?" Like, you know?
Throw me a lifeline. That
Yeah,
would
they
be
laugh, and I'm like,
wonderful.
"I can bring her over your house for a little bit. I'm just."
Right.
They're like, "Oh, I'm good." I'm like, "Okay, thank you." So, but there are places for respite care too that loved ones can go to. If you have them in the home, they can go like to a respite care place for like a weekend or a week, so you can take a vacation too.
Yeah, that's huge. Because I keep
Mhm.
thinking military spouses, I mean, and some of us are retired, so
Yeah.
some of us are, a little on the older side. But you're thinking of active military community that's a very young age
Oh
category.
yeah, for sure.
My brain doesn't go to those places, but I also keep forgetting so many of us really are caring for our parents. And so it's
Hmm.
equally as relevant to talk about what it looks like with, having your elderly parents or family members to also consider. And
No,
that's,
for sure. And people do think of caregiving just helping, older adults, but it's really any type of vulnerable adult, or it could be caregiving for a child. If a child has, let's say, some type of, health issue that requires them to have, 24/7 care, that can be a lot to,
yeah.
the parent. So not only are you a parent, but you're also a caregiver too. So, you know, I don't want to take that from, anybody that's watching as well.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I do think it's really important to consider all of the age categories that we may
Yes.
be caring for, because it could be kids, it could be spouses, it could be parents. We're in that age group where it really could be any siblings, I mean, anybody.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
I just learned that I was doing some research last week, and I just learned that in 2024, a survey was done. It's 53 million caregivers in the U.S., and that number just like it just was mind-boggling. I would have never guessed that it was that
I
many.
wouldn't either. So this was right on time. We needed
It
this topic. We need to
was
talk
so
about this.
yes. Take heed, people. Take heed.
Well, yes. Take heed, take notes, take all the things,
All of
take
that.
all the gems.
Yes, for
Yeah,
sure.
okay. Okay. All right. So do you have, so I always talk, let me back up for a second here. I always talk about self-care, right? When we're
Yes.
talking about self-care, we're not talking about like the big like massage day,
Hmm.
spa day, pedicure.
Right.
We're not even talking about run a marathon, that kind of self-care. We're talking about like what rejuvenates the whole self, right?
Right.
Especially if you're a caregiver, you have to start considering self-care from the whole entire perspective of who you are as an entire individual, not just your physical, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, and I always talk about make sure you're not just like like I have an hour here, I'll fit something in. Each day at the end of the day, I'm going to care for myself at some point, before I go to bed when I'm already exhausted. I like to talk about it from the perspective of how do you consistently give back to yourself so you're not so completely overwhelmed and burnt out by the end of the day. Like,
No,
do we
that's
want to
very
be tired when
important.
we lay our head down? Sure, of course we do. We all want a good night's sleep. But do we want to be burned out? Absolutely not. So, do you have any favorite things to kind of like rejuvenate, give back to yourself throughout the day that somebody might be able to
Yeah,
take?
no, for sure.
Okay.
So I can say for me personally, now I know you mentioned about outside of the massage, but I haven't gotten one in a while, and that's something I need to
Massage is my favorite,
schedule.
just
But
to be
I do
clear.
try to do at least 2 to 3 things per month
Mhm.
from a self care perspective that will help to rejuvenate me. And sometimes I actually do take my grandmother with me, as a treat. Like I'll do a pedicure and I'll take her, and that's something that prior to me taking care of her, she never experienced before. So it was a fun thing for her too. But I do Reiki to help
Okay,
me,
yes.
kind of woosah and help to take that load off because sometimes I find myself running on autopilot and I don't realize until like the end of the night and I kind of wind down that my body is like, whew. You take that breath. But I do, after I put my grandmother in the bed, I do take that time. And it's very important. Like I might not go to bed for like 2 hours after I put her in bed. I'm a night owl. But taking that time to just kind of process what happened in the day, what I could do better, what do I have for tomorrow, and just giving myself and allowing myself to kind of have grace. I usually watch my favorite shows or binge. I
Yeah.
think that's very important because I never really get to watch it during the day unless I'm watching something she wants to watch. So
Yeah.
that's very important. And a lot of times people don't really think of that. But also going out with my friends because again, that's something that was who I was before I started caregiving, and I try to maintain some type of social. So I do try to have some type of social activity every couple of months. So I mean, excuse me, twice a month. So like this weekend, I went to a basketball game. Something that I enjoy. Yeah. So finding different things or going out for birthdays. That's something I did, I think, last weekend. So doing those little things and communicating with my friends. And sometimes they understand caregiving, but the majority of my friends don't, unfortunately. But they do try to encourage me the best way that they know how. You just have to educate the people around you on what you need, so that they can support you. But those are some of the things. I know some people will do journaling, but for me, I like to kind of surround myself by other caregivers that understand again what I'm going through. Because, like I said something to a friend one time, and they were trying to downplay caregiving, and I'm just like, well, it's equally as important as what you're doing as well. Like I'm not a tit for tat type of person,
Mhm.
so I'm all about just it's enough space for everybody, and let's just help each other out and support the best way we know how.
I love that so much. I definitely think maybe one of the most important things I think I'm hearing you, I think they're
Mhm.
all important, but
Yeah.
one of the things that I think we tend to do is like compare.
Yes.
And we can do that to ourselves a lot. Like, we don't
Yes.
even need somebody to do it on our behalf. We do it to ourselves. Oh, I know that I have it hard, but that person has it harder. So I don't really have a right to feel the way I'm feeling, to,
Mhm.
lean into other people, like to be a burden. And I'm putting that in quotes because we're not burdens, right?
Right.
It is the reason that we have community, that we have our loved ones, that we have our core group, is so that we can lean into them, so that we can allow them to lean into us.
For sure.
But yeah, absolutely. Looking at somebody else's situation, and even like let's just say you're in a community where we're all caregivers in this particular community, and looking at
Mhm.
another caregiver and going, "Oh, you get it so much worse than me. I don't have a right to lean into this community that heavily because I can see you need it more." Not true. Not true.
Yeah.
Somebody
'Cause we go
else's
different ways.
Yes. Yeah. Somebody else's experience does not minimize ours.
Correct. Yeah. So don't compare. And, I suffered with thoughts of, because I tried to move out of the state while I was a caregiver and just try to handle it from an administrative type of situation and then come back home every couple months and have home health aides in the home. And it's like, I used to say, well, I want to be normal. I'm this age and I'm doing this. I'm too young for doing this, but it has no age. And obviously I feel like I was destined for the role. And I know that sounds crazy to say, but it to me, I find joy in it, but I do have those moments where I'm like, well, I want to do this. I want to do that. But I still, like I said, make time from a social aspect and I travel. So that's my time.
Oh, I love that.
So my life, I learned, it took me a while to learn it, but my life, like you said, is not like anybody else's life. It's Sierra's life and Sierra's world. So, and I figure out how to best navigate that world.
I love it. You're a rock star. More minutes. So, a couple things I want to ask you.
Mhm.
First of which is, do you have any last minute words of wisdom?
Yes, I would just say, actually, because a couple things I could say, but let me see if I can shorten it up.
Okay.
I mean, we talked a lot about it today, but again, my favorite word right now on my podcast is giving yourself grace. I think that we are so hard on ourselves, but again, there is no manual. Every person in every situation is different. So allow yourself the grace to make mistakes, but learn from those mistakes because it's going to be okay. I know it's going to seem hard in the beginning, but again, give yourself grace to make it through. Again, every day is going to be different, but every day you're still going to love that person that you're taking care of. And that's all that matters. When you see that smile on their face, that smile might not come every day on their face.
Yeah.
But when you see that smile, it just makes it all so worth it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So, okay. On that note, I'm
Mhm.
going to throw something out there. I love that piece of advice. I live by that. I love it. Absolutely love it. And I will say that I think some people are going, how, I don't want you to answer this. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
But I think some people are going, how do I give myself grace?
Hmm.
There's not just one quick answer, I don't think. There's a lot of things that we have to do to get to the point where we can give ourselves grace. On that note, though, I think that if somebody is in this position of being a caregiver or knows that they might be sometime soon or is curious about learning more, that is something that they could dive into with you. And not like a quick answer, but like a truly thought out full answer where they can really work through it with you. On that note, how could somebody get a hold of you to learn how to work with you?
No, for sure. So you can go to my website, www.rosehr.org, or you can find me on social media at CC the Diva, CECTHEDIVA. And I'm putting together some courses as well for caregiving. I call it Caregiving 101
Mhm.
because, you don't want to wait till something happens. Go ahead and take that initiative. So that's what I'll be talking about in my course.
Yeah, love it. Okay, we're gonna drop those links in the description as well, so it's easy for people to find you.
No worries. And I do talk about caregiving on my podcast. That's usually the third week of every month in my podcast. I talk about some type of healthcare topic related to caregiving, whether it's tips on being a caregiver or self care, different things of that, like what we talked about here, but in more depth.
Amazing. So we'll link that as well.
Yes,
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending the time. I really, truly do appreciate you.
no problem. Thank you for having me, and this was amazing. And I look forward to seeing and talking to you all. Make sure you comment.
Make sure you comment.